I quite often think of myself as an escapee from psychology, and one of my great places to escape into is anthropology, and looking at how other so-called more primitive, I have to laugh, more primitive cultures do things, because there's enormous wisdom in I mean, the whole idea of the difference between what I now call planning activities and preparing activities came from reading Benjamin Lee Whorf on Native American cultures, societies. When they know that a stranger is coming, it's about a day of preparation to get ready for the stranger. And part of the ritual is they're going to let the stranger speak first, and so on. A little bit like in open dialogue when the therapist says to the client, how would you like to use this meeting?
So it's a matter of being prepared, but not to plan everything in detail, but to be open towards what is emerging, what's happening.
You know, Harry Gulish and Harlan Anderson tried to capture it in what they call the not knowing position, but that bamboozled everybody a little bit, but because they'd obviously got years of experience behind them. I've tried to capture it into that, in that poised resourcefulness notion.
Yeah. I remember you also used the term the leader as a resourceful conversational partner. Together with Conliffe you have written about that. Could you unfold this idea a little bit more?
When here this morning wanted really to say it's not conversation but dialogue, and I didn't really quite understand. I mean, con is with, the versing is crossing, moving about, sort of wifting and wafting and crossing over a landscape of possibilities with others. I still like the notion of conversation, and I would always like to think of a leader as well, perhaps there always being two leaders acting as each other's shadow all the time, and one sitting in the background while, say at a board meeting, the leader was conducting the meeting, and the shadow occasionally whispering, why don't you ask so-and-so, as a shout. And then every so often saying something like, can me and my shadow just have a moment of reflection between us? And so on. And say, because I don't exactly always know precisely what to do next. But, and in fact, you were perhaps there last night, were you?
No, I didn't participate last night. No.
Well, I joined the panel when somebody else didn't. And I gave an example there where a colleague and I were interviewing a fairly senior executive, again a woman, and we thought she approached difficulties in a very brilliant way. And she said, I never know at first quite what to do, so I walk around and I ask a few frontline workers, I ask some colleagues, I do this, I do that. And I really take quite a while exploring the available possibilities and so forth. And we thought this was so nice that we said to her, could we play this tape for your colleagues? And with the ethics of the situation, you listen to it for a bit and see if you like what you've said. And she only listened to it for about 20 seconds and she said, good God, no, you can't play that. They'll think I'm a total idiot.
Okay. Yeah.
We have such a pressure
Yeah.
on us
Yeah.
when we're in a position of authority
Yeah.
to say, now what we do here, you do this, you do that, and you do so and so. Right, off you go and do it.
But if we talk about leadership, maybe in the future, hopefully, which would be more responsive and more open towards dialogues, could you give any kind of advice, maybe, to future leaders?
Well, perhaps not wanting David Cameron in England at the moment, product of a public school that's meant to turn out nothing but leaders. And apparently when he was young he was saying, I'd like to be Prime Minister, I think I'd be rather good at it. Whereas the Labour Party lost the last election very badly. So badly that the current leader felt he had to resign. And everybody saying, well, who's going to be the next one? And finally, somebody who's been knocking around in the background for about 35 years or so, reluctantly said, oh, well, all right, I'll give it a go. People, the people who I think should be leaders are the ones most reluctant to be leaders. Who are most reluctant to tell other people what to do, who are most reluctant to impose things. I'm going to be rude. There are too many people around with smart-ass ideas which seem a very good idea at the time, but as soon as there's the effort to implement them, you suddenly realise they're too thin, they're too simple, they haven't taken into account the larger complexities of the context at all, and they have to be taken back. And this has been the record of our government for the last few years, smart-ass ideas which have proved in the longer term disastrous in their implementation. And, I mean, one thing that Bjorn Gustafsson said to me right from the very start when we very met, he said, there's no shortage of good ideas. Good ideas don't do it.
Okay.
Somebody wants to say, oh, I've got a lot of good ideas, I want to be leader.
That's not enough.
That's not enough.
Yeah. But we know among children, the child who is creative and invents a lot of games will easily get friends if he or she is not too dominating. But it attracts us when somebody has good ideas. We get attracted to that and we want to be part of it. So I think it's a matter of finding the right balance, because you also need to have good ideas in order to create new enterprises.
Gerd was trying to say again this morning about balance.
Yeah.
Well, yes, somebody with zest, with passion and so forth. But this is why I'm thinking about this idea of a leader plus a shadow. Somebody continually to whisper in their ear of don't go too overboard on this idea, there are other things to think about.
Yeah. Sometimes in your text you mention the word phronesis from the old Greeks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What can we use this term for today when we talk about leadership?
Well, read Aristotle. I'm having an Alzheimer's moment. It comes in the ethics, the what ethics. But he's pointing out, he's actually saying that young people really aren't yet in the position they're too full of smart arse ideas, and they haven't got yet enough experience of the complexities and difficulties of ordinary everyday life things. And he's making an enormous plea for how much particularities count, and getting a sense of the particularities. And I remember when I first started working in KCC, and I at one moment said, I want to make a critical comment here. And everyone went, oh, as if by the word critical, I meant what I thought they were doing was wrong. And I didn't mean that at all. I meant, I think we need to consider other possibilities as well. And that capacity to, part of phronesis is looking at it this way, looking at it that way, looking at it some other way. And then, of course, phronesis is connected with coming to a judgment. Not a judgment of rightness or wrongness, but a judgment of what actually is the kind of situation that we're in. And again, this is where the whole notion of what's it like? The best sort of capacity we have in drawing on past experience is what's the current situation like from all the experiences I've had in the past? How is it similar, but how is it different? What's its particular uniqueness? And being able to live and deal with uniqueness. And this is why it's really not to do with being scientific. Because being scientific is working with generalities. Whereas wisdom and judgment is dealing with uniquenesses and particularities.